I actually feel that I would probably do best if I simply said, I agree with all the wonderful things that have been said, and said so beautifully, especially by Pujya Swami. All those who have spoken have communicated the truths, and I don't think that I can add very much, but I will try at least to reinforce a sense of these profound insights. If a religion, as religions do, and especially my tradition, affirm that the cosmos is a creation, then we are affirming that the ecosystem is a manifestation of the divine. The book of Genesis that opens the Hebrew Bible indicates that we are placed in the garden to work and to preserve it. We would call that today sustainable development. In other words, sustainable development is the mandate of the truly religiously conscious person, the person who is spiritually alive. If my extreme language may be forgiven, I would say any religious person who is not consumed with a care for the cosmos, the creation, the ecosystem, is not truly religious. To claim to be so and yet to be impervious to not only the beauty and the glory, but the challenges and responsibilities is nothing less than hypocrisy. Some very important quotes, biblical quotes, have already been mentioned. But allow me to refer to the book of Leviticus, where God is presented as saying, "The earth is mine, and you are sojourners and transients with me." This is enormously important. Humans delude themselves into illusions of permanence. And this is very dangerous, because when we think that we are all secure and all permanent, we are arrogate to ourselves, not just privileges, but a kind of authority that tends more often than not to be abusive. Understanding that we are transient and that we are therefore vulnerable is an enormously important moral, religious understanding. And this period of the pandemic surely should have reinforced our awareness of how vulnerable we all are. In a sense, if it has done so, it is certainly a silver lining to the cloud. Mention has already been made of our interconnectedness. I would say, and indeed, Swamiji has referred to the central value of love. According to our sages of the Talmud, the most important teaching in the Bible is love your neighbor as yourself. And the great mystical rabbi and great scholar of the 16th century, Rabbi Yehuda Loewy of Prague, declared that it is not possible to love God if we do not love God's creatures. And that should be an obvious truism, but it's not. And we religious representatives and leaders have the obligation to instill that awareness more profoundly within our respective communities. Another rabbinic mystic understood the verse, love your neighbor, not as yourself, but as the Hebrew can easily mean, love your neighbor, he is yourself. We are one in the divine. And of course, the central declaration of Jewish faith is precisely the affirmation of the oneness of the divine of which we are all part. And so again, this period has highlighted our interconnectedness, our interdependency, our responsibility for one another. And the challenge is now going to be to sustain these positive lessons from this period. But let me just add that religions are more than faith. They are, if they are true to their métier, they are ways of life. And ways of life concern all aspects of living. Within my own tradition, one of the important aspects of this way of life is precisely in dietary laws, where perhaps we did not reach the heights that Dharma religions reached already so many centuries and millennia ago. But nevertheless, there was the understanding already within Scripture that a dietary consciousness inculcates holiness. More than that, it should inculcate ethical awareness. Our sages understand that the laws for keeping kosher are designed to ennoble the human spirit. We today live in a very different world. Once upon a time, there were conditions under which people had, if you like, respectful relationships with animal life. Today, we live in an era of unparalleled barbarism in relation to animal life. But it's not just the cruelty that is involved that diminishes human consciousness and refinement. The consequences of this cruelty reverberate upon us, not only ethically, but practically. Indeed, the vast majority of pandemics that we have experienced in recent times, includes the present one, seem to appear to be zoonotic. And whether it's bird flu or swine flu or whatever the flus are, they are coming in no small part through our lack of respect for the identity and the integrity of animal life, the manipulation that blurs the border and allows all kinds of infections to spread. Much of it is the product of crass Western developed greed that consumes billions of animals, confines them in spaces which are breeding grounds for viruses, and of course have to be fed these animals masses of antibiotics pumped into them, which then lead to resistance and the production of superbugs that threaten human society. And all of this, aside from the degradation of our environment, the destruction of our ecosystem, the enormous waste of natural resources, all coming from it. All of this is incompatible with a way of life that demands that we live in ethical consciousness and responsibility with sentient beings and with our world at large. So one of the most important teachings that we must draw from this episode is a greater awareness of how terrible our misbehavior has been and continues to be. And that we are blessed with the opportunities today to find alternatives. Perhaps there were times when we couldn't find adequate sustenance everywhere in the world in all times through a plant-based diet. But today we can. As Swamiji mentioned, there is enough to be able to provide for all. In fact, if we really adopted truly a plant-based diet, we would have the resources to feed all the hungry in our world. And therefore not to do so is in fact an affront against our fellow human beings, aside from its ramifications for the natural world, for sentient beings, and for our ecosystem as a whole. So this, I think, is the most important practical behavior message that we need to be able to take away from this period. And we need to say to governments and to authorities to try to withstand the pressures of business, multinational, and the agro-food industry in terms of the livestock industry. We need to, above all, to tell them there is a slogan that has become commonplace amongst many good people in recent times: do well by doing good. It's a nice slogan, but we need to be able to emphasize to the world that you do good by being well. If you are physically and morally healthy, then you produce a better world, a world of greater goodness. And goodness is what must motivate the policies of authorities, national and international. We need to convey that message, that by understanding a teleology of service and of dedication for others, we justify our presence in leadership and on authority. And that is the purpose for governance. These are not new lessons. These are old lessons. But we live in a period of where we have to renew these for the sustenance, for the preservation, for the future, and for the flourishing of our planet and of all life on it. Thank you, and God bless you all.